Hello, Dental ATeam listeners. This is Kira Dent, and I just wanted to say thank you so much for being part of my Dental ATeam family. I seriously love doing this podcast. I thought I was going to hate it, and I love it. I love it so much because I get to connect with you. I get to hear how this podcast is helping you and your practice be better. So if you have loved this podcast and you are willing to share, I would greatly appreciate if you'll share with your friends, if you'll leave us a review, if you'll give us 5 stars, anything you can do. Just like you guys grow your practices, we're trying to grow this podcast to positively impact the world of dental. This is how we get to grow our Dental ATeam family. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoy the show. Hey everyone, welcome to the Dental ATeam podcast. We're your hosts, Kira Dent
and Dr. Mark Costas.
Mark and I had this crazy idea that maybe we could combine a dentist and a team member's perspective because let's face it, dentistry can be a challenging profession with those two perspectives. And Dental ATeam podcast was created.
I'm a practicing dentist, a multiple practice owner, a dental performance coach, and the founder of the Dental Success Institute.
I've been a dental assistant, treatment coordinator, scheduler, biller, office manager, current practice owner, and international dental consultant. Mark and I don't just understand you, we are you.
Our goal is to positively impact the world of dentistry by sharing our lessons learned from the road in hundreds of dental offices.
2 perspectives, 1 mission, to help dental professionals reach their full potential. Welcome to the Dental ATeam podcast. Hello, Dental ATeam listeners. This is Kira, and I am thrilled to bring back one of the most popular guest on our podcast. His podcast got one of the highest download numbers that we have seen on Dental ATeam's history. So I'm super jazzed to bring back Dr. Deren Flesher. If you guys missed his last episode, we chatted all things hygiene and assisted hygiene because Deren does phenomenal work in his office by having assisted hygiene work flawlessly. So if you missed that episode, be sure to go check it out. But today we're going to dive more into hygiene. So Deren, welcome back. How are you today?
I'm great, Kira. Thanks for having me back. That was exciting. I didn't realize that I was a popular kid. That's awesome.
You are the popular kid. And people have told me that on other podcasts, like, Kira, you had one of our most downloaded episodes. And I'm like, yeah, right. No, Deren, I literally looked this morning before we popped on the podcast today because I didn't want to have a fallacy on the podcast. And your podcast still ranks in the top, I want to say top 5 most downloaded. And you're competing with some of the ones from when the podcast very first started, which obviously they've had more time. So highest download numbers, your podcast with assisted hygiene hit the highest numbers I think that we've seen on any of them. So congrats on that. And thank you for sharing such valuable knowledge. I'm super jazzed to have you back on.
Well, that's awesome. Yeah, that's exciting to hear. And if anything that I do is valuable to other people, I'm always happy to share it.
Well, I appreciate that. So, and Deren, we're also, guys, if you haven't checked out his awesome new software, Medento, I'm freaking obsessed with the voicemail piece of it. So don't worry, stay tuned for that because honestly, docs, for those of you who don't remember to do your Postop calls, any office is struggling with unscheduled treatment plans, Deren has this super cool piece. I was just talking to an office this last weekend about it. So I want to make sure we leave some time for you to talk about that. Because seriously, the fee you charge is substantially less than you would ever pay a front office team member or dental assistants or a hygienist to do post-op calls. It's unreal smart. So anyway, I'm just putting a teaser out there for Medento because I'm obsessed with it. And it's been really fun to see offices loving it too. But let's dive into hygiene some more, Deren, and let's talk about hygiene. And you mentioned last time on the podcast of how you used to bonus your hygiene department and watch their fluoride and their sealants. That's a really big thing you do to increase your hygiene department. But then you noticed a statistic where when one would go up, the other one would go down and how you work around that. So let's just dive right back in with where we left off and talk about that a little more today if you're open to that.
Yeah. So, everything bonus-wise in the office always starts with production. It starts with numbers. As much as we don't want to, it's kind of a dirty way to think about things. We want to think about this being healthcare and caring about the patients. If the business isn't making extra money, there's no money for bonuses. So I kind of want to lay that groundwork, and that's the way my office operates too. We have financial incentives first and foremost, and then if there's personal goals or departmental goals, that's where the money gets shared based on kind of those performances. So,
and chiming in as a team member, because okay, Dr. Flesher, he's a doctor, so of course he's going to think of a business. But honestly, as team members, I think it's really important as team members to realize that the dental practice, it is healthcare and we are helping patients, but it's also business. And if there's not money coming into the practice, there's not money to pay the bills needed to run the practice. So, and it's also important to remember, like, just doing your job does not qualify as a bonus, in my opinion. And I know I'm totally like being very direct on this, but a bonus should be for going above and beyond what your normal job is. So like making phone calls and seating patients on time and assisting and doing hygiene and doing your perio, like that's your normal job. That's not going above and beyond. So I really want to get clear that team members, like it is important for us to realize that a bonus just doesn't mean like, hey, we showed up to work, we did our job, we should be bonus just because. A bonus really should be going above and beyond. So I want to chime in, Deren, from the team side of making sure we realize as team members, we need to be going above and beyond to qualify for that bonus that our employers are so generously giving to us to participate in.
Right. Yeah. And it's just good to have that perspective because, fortunately for me, a lot of my staff, my team, has come from corporate. And so they've kind of got this idea that it's kind of us versus them and all this kind of stuff. And, I am the them, it's just me. It's my office. If there's money going to you, it's coming from me. So there is no common enemy. There's none of that going on in my office. So right. I try to be real with them and not in a scary way, not saying, if you don't bring in more money, somebody's fired, but just to make it, that correlation real about if there's not extra money, there's not extra money. I don't have it to give to you and I want to, because if there's extra money, that means I've met my goals financially too. So anyway, so as far as hygiene specifically, it's kind of evolved over time, but we first kind of let them operate and establish a baseline when they come in, kind of see what's kind of normal output for you without additional effort, what is happening in your chair. And then we create goals that go above and beyond those goals. And now that we've done this long enough, we kind of know what those are from the get-go. But initially we just kind of said, what do these numbers look like from a fluoride percentage and a sealants per day? What are we doing without effort? And then we, as a team, came up with, well, what would it look like if we tried, if we did everything we could, what's realistically achievable, but a stretch goal that would mean more and, be valuable to the office, be valuable to the patients, and then, in turn, be financially rewarding to the people providing that service. And so we, as I said in the last podcast, we had fluoride goals and we had sealant goals. And initially we didn't realize that those were potentially working against each other. So we finally dialed it in to realize that if one goes up, the other one's probably going down, just because people are only going to spend a certain amount of money, quote unquote, extra in your office that day that they didn't come in expecting to spend it all. Mm-hmm. So in my office, keeping in mind that these are 11-hour work days, so you'd have to kind of scale it back based on your 8-hour day if that's what you do. We have like 5 different goals, if you will, and you have to have a pairing of these two things to kind of meet your goal. So it's either 62.5% fluoride and 5.5 sealants a day. If fluoride goes up 2.5%, sealants can go down 0.5. So as each one kind of steps up, the other one incrementally steps down. So any one of those pairings, and I don't want to gloss over those numbers if you want to go back into those. I just didn't want to
No, I do.
Overwhelm with the math.
I'm like, okay, how did you come up with those? Because those are very, very specific numbers that exactly. Yeah. So I'm like, hang on. In my mind, instantly thinking like, 1, how are you tracking this? 2, how are you analyzing this? 3, how did you figure that out? So like, please dive in deep. I think that's why people loved your last one. So don't gloss, Deren. Go for it.
Okay. All right. I'll dive in. All right. So the common way to calculate fluoride was to divide the fluoride by kind of all your exams, all your profis that you did. I guess not all the exams, all the interactions from a hygiene perspective. So all the profis, all the maintenances, and then you kind of see how many people came through hygiene got fluoride. Initially, we kind of made the assumption that all kids would get fluoride. Mm-hmm. But as we've gone through, we've realized that a combo of things. So we either had parents declining fluoride based on perceived health risks, or we have insurances declining fluoride more and more just because they're finding ways to cut corners. So we've added kid fluoride into our goal rather than making an assumption that it's going to be 100%. So it's a little bit of a complicated math problem, but basically we kind of met in the middle. We assume that 50% of kids are going to get it no matter what, and 50% are going to have to be convinced in some way or another, whether they're morally opposed to fluoride or financially they're having to pay for it out of pocket, whatever the reason is. We have to convince maybe half of the parents of kids to commit to fluoride for their kiddo. So
that's interesting. That's a lot higher than I was expecting. I thought kids were like a slam dunk 80, 90% guaranteed because insurance is covering it most of the time. So good to know that it was 50-50.
Yeah. So I'd say probably somewhere in the 80%, maybe. I'm just kind of coming up with this off the top of my head, but maybe 80% are covered. And then there might be another 20 to 30% that their parents, even with it being nothing out of pocket, they're like, they don't need it today, or I don't know about that fluoride stuff. I've heard
it's rat
brain
poison.
effects and
Somebody
all
told
that kind
me
of
rat
stuff.
poison, and I was like, wow.
Right. Yeah. I got fluoride every 6 months as a kid, and I feel like I came out okay. So
I know. I think we're okay. I did the same thing. So I think I even had fluoride tablets at home. So, rat poison.
I'm all about the fluoride.
I feel good about it.
And I've got 2 kids of my own now, and I can honestly say that I put it on them every 6 months too. So, I practice what I preach. So they can find studies that support whatever they want. But anyway, so there's about half of the parents that need convincing that fluoride is still something they should opt to do, even if it's nothing out of pocket. So half of the 1120s, which is half of the kid exams, we subtract that from all fluorides, which is, I can't remember the code, 1206 or 1208. So that's the numerator in this equation. That's the top number. And then we divide that total. So we've subtracted half of our kids from our total. And then we divide that by the sum of all of the 1110s, all of the 4910s, and then half of the kids again added back in. So that total, that equation is how we come up with our fluoride percentage. And so without effort, we were seeing that we were getting somewhere in the low 60s, maybe around 60%. And so we had to obviously create goals that went above and beyond 60%. So we just kind of stepped up 2.5% 5 times. So 62.5, 65, 67.5, 70, and then 72.5 is the top level.
What was your reason for doing 2.5? I'm just curious, why did you choose 2.5? Did that just feel obtainable? Was there any reason behind the 2.5? Because I know a lot of offices are like, well, if we're at 60, let's go for 80. But you went up a very small amount.
Well, it kind of correlated as well with the sealants. So every 2.5 that the fluoride went up, the sealants were allowed to go down by 0.5 for the day. So sealants are not a percentage. They're just how many happened today in your chair. So for that 62.5% fluoride, you have to do 5.5 sealants per day average for the month.
Gotcha.
So when you go up to 65, you can go down to 5 sealants. When you go up to 67.5% fluoride, you go to 4.5 sealants. So all these numbers are definitely able to be manipulated for whatever works in your office. If you feel like 62.5% is too low to start bonusing, well, that's where the sealants come into play. 5.5 sealants per day is a pretty lofty goal. I mean, in my office, sealants are like $55. So that's another $300 that's coming in from sealants. So
right. And compared to how much is your fluoride in your office?
38, I think, somewhere around $40.
Okay. So right there, I mean, we can hit fluoride on every single patient. But if you can do sealants, even just a couple of them a day, that also can help increase. And I know your team does a really good job with sealants and making sure they're well trained on that. And I know they've got some really awesome verbiage, which I'm sure came from you, of half the mouth today. And, a lot of our patients do X amount. So I would love to hear some of that as well. But it's very interesting. And it makes sense why you want a good mix between the two. Fluoride's great if we can get it on everyone. But like you said, there is only so much discretionary income they're willing to spend that day when coming to the dentist. They don't, some of them will do it, and I don't offer it, but I like that your team knows the flexibility of what they can or can't do. And it's very clear. And it's very clear what, if it goes here, then get this many sealants. If it's this many sealants, this much fluoride. And they just go, in my mind, I see this scale where we've got them there, they're balanced. And if this one goes up, this one can go down, and vice versa. So they stay very balanced with each other.
And to kind of get into the weeds a little bit, you kind of hinted at verbiage and stuff. So one of the things that happens pretty often is, you present both of those preventive options, and the patient says, well, I only want to do one of those today. Which one is more important? And, they're both important, but you can never do today's fluoride next time.
It's
You
true.
can do sealants at any point, but you can't do today's fluoride in 6 months. So we don't put it that way to the patient. We just come up with the decision that fluoride is the way that we're going to go today, whether it's, well, fluoride's a little bit less, let's commit to that today, or here's some literature on sealants. If you're not quite convinced, why don't you think about it? We'll do that next time. Whatever makes sense in that moment to kind of steer towards fluoride is the way we go. But the biggest reason is you can't make up for missing today's fluoride, but we can do sealants next time at no real harm other than 6 months more of exposure of those grooves, which is, that's a real threat. But, it's sort of like, investing in your retirement fund. You can't put money in this year's IRA next year. You've got to do it this year. And same thing with fluoride. So
right.
we try to steer them that way.
I like it. And how do your team does, and I know we talked about this last time of you have the scorecard. So honestly, if you guys did not get that, seriously pop in. Deren had a really fantastic scorecard that they use. I know, I can't remember exactly the verbiage when I was in your practice, but it was something about that they'll literally say like, okay, of all your teeth, there are this many that are healthy teeth, this many that have fillings. What's the verbiage that you guys use for the sealants? Because I remember when I heard it, I was like, that was so smart. I just can't remember exactly how you guys phrase it to your patients.
Yeah, we talk about, you've got 16 teeth in your mouth that have kind of the same vulnerable grooves. We're talking about premolars and molars. And of those 16, 9 of yours already have had work. They've already had some issue already, but 7 of them are still eligible to do kind of a protective coat, kind of like a clear coat, except for it's white, that really seal in those grooves and can maybe prevent you from needing the same thing you've had done in those 9 other teeth. And it's less expensive, it's less painful, it's less time in the chair. There's no shots, there's no drills. It's a way to avoid future dentistry by putting out a small amount of money today to maybe keep those 7 teeth from becoming like those 9 teeth. Something to that effect.
That's what it was. And I thought it was great. And I know your team does a really good job with intraorals. They show them. And I know that when I've been there before, a lot of times they would say, and, we understand that 7 teeth, a lot of people will just do the right side today and the left side when they come back in 6 months. Something along those lines. I loved that you phrased it of how other people have broken it up so they feel that they're going along with the crowd, that this is what other people do. It was really, really brilliant how you did it in your office.
Yeah, we just try to kind of generate consensus there using some kind of principles of persuasion to our advantage, if you will, not in a devious way, but just making them feel like, oh, this is what people do. And it's true. I mean, that is what people do.
That is what they do.
Yeah. I mean, partly because that's what we observed, but then also because that's what we've continued to steer based on success rate. So, if we said you got seven and it's going to cost you $400, all or nothing, what do you want to do? They're like, I'll think about it. I'll talk to my wife, whatever. But if you're like, you got 7, but they're divided up in 2, 2, 2, and 1, a lot of people kind of do them by corner of the mouth. So let's go ahead and just do the 2 today. What do you think about that? And they're like, oh, that's a bite-sized piece. I can do that. And and then they've got kind of a goal to work towards too. They're like, oh, okay, well now I'm prepared. This is what it was today. It's going to be 2 more of that and then 1 more that's half of that. And everything's healthy. I don't have to worry about those 7 teeth anymore. So yeah, it really just kind of steps it down. It kind of throws in their face really quickly. Well, here's everything. And they're like, well, that's kind of scary. I don't want to do that much, but I can do a quarter of that, or, whatever that comes out to be, a little bit more than a quarter. That's no big deal. And that's just 1 corner of my mouth. It won't take but a couple minutes, no shots, avoiding future dentistry, all the good things we told them. And then, that's an easy sale in comparison.
Right, exactly. And your team does a really good job. I love that they're so prepared. They're planning on doing sealants. It's not an afterthought. Like they're ready to go for every single patient because they assume that everyone's going to do sealants for that day. They know they're doing sealants. They know they're doing fluoride. It's out ready to go. It's not like, oh, shoot, like, let me go figure this out. You guys are on it. It's Johnny on the spot. Financial coordinators there. We know the prices. So there's no lag time because I think a lot of hygienists hesitate to do this, or hygiene departments, because they're scared of like, well, what about the time? And then I've got to wait for the financial coordinator. And then I've got to wait for this, that there's no time. And then I'm running behind. Your team is very proactive on that.
Our default is yes. which, like I said last time, you were very helpful in kind of reinforcing at the doctor level to assume the yes, but for some reason we've always assumed the yes in hygiene. So we have, we use Dry Shield in my office. Some people like Isolite or Isodry or Mr. Thirsty, whatever your brand of choice is, that's fine. We
Please
use
no
Dry
more
Shield.
Mr. Thirsties. Such a gross name. So visual. So visual.
We use the Dry Shield. I like it. It's autoclavable, and it's similar concept. A mouth prop with suction built in. As I've told my team, and I believe this to be very true as well. And I know sealants get a bad rap because people see so many done so poorly. They're just kind of slapped in. Nothing's dry. It's got recurrent caries. If we can't get good isolation, we don't do it. So I would rather never do a sealant than to do a poor sealant. So
agreed. Totally agree.
We get good isolation. If the kid's not big enough to tolerate the Dry Shield, we'll wait 6 months. We get good isolation. We pumice it. We air abrade it if needed, etch and do everything we're supposed to do. It's perfectly dry, and we use high quality stuff. I think we, not that I've got a personal favorite, but I just read the research that Ultra Dense is one of the better for tolerating moisture. And so even though we're getting good isolation, I want to have a little bit of room for error. So we try to use high quality stuff because we're charging top dollar for what we do. We want to have a good outcome for, this kid's going to have these teeth for 80 years, hopefully. So we're not trying to set them up for failure on day one. So
right.
I think that's important to reiterate that, aside from the business of what we're doing here, again, we're doing healthcare. We want to do the right thing by our patients. And, that starts with properly doing the procedure, and isolation is key when it comes to sealants.
I love that.
But to kind of go into your preparedness, we've got a little sandwich Ziploc baggie that has pumice, a little pumice slow speed head on it, the etch, the sealant, it's all there. And it's just tucked behind everything in the op. And same thing with the Dry Shield. It's all one little package that's ready to go. It's kind of always ready on standby. And as soon as they get a yes, all that stuff is just pulled out real quickly. So instead of scrambling and running into sterilization or the lab or whatever to go find all the stuff, it's ready, it's there, and we've prepared for it. And that's often the difference in probably a lot of offices in doing it or not is
correct.
Ready to do it. So we're always ready to do it.
I like that so much because I hear all the time, like, we don't have time to do sealants. We don't. And I think if there was like $100 price tag where you would get $100 if you could do these sealants, I know you'd find a way to do it. So like use that efficiency mindset and figure out how you could do it, because I've seen it done plenty of times. And I believe if it's been done somewhere else, then there's a way that we can do it as well. So Deren, thank you for sharing all of that. I think that there were so many pieces you just, and not even like glossed over. Thanks for like diving deep, because I'm like, no, like let's figure this out. So now I want to spin to, you do a great job with bonuses in your office as well. How do you bonus your hygiene team, and then other bonuses you do? Because I think this is an area that people work on. And I know we preach in DSI with the Dental ATeam. I know your practice, like we don't do bonuses if there's not money available. So first and foremost, bonuses don't occur unless your practice is a healthy practice. And I mean, you've at least got a 65% or lower overhead. I strive to aim for 50 to 55% before bonuses are being offered. That's my take. Deren, I'm sure you've got your opinion. But I want to hear about your bonuses and how you guys do it in your practice, if you're open to sharing that, because I think you do a really fantastic job on that.
Yeah. So I subscribe to everything that DSI does from a when should you bonus perspective, but I try to personally not bog them down with profitability and overhead, because a lot of that's in my, a lot of that's not in anybody's control. It's rent and stuff like that. And a lot of it is really on my shoulders. It's not them. So I've tried to I have those numbers in mind, but I really boiled it down to things that mean something to them.
Totally agree. And I want to chime in on the team side of that. Doctors, like, you need to know that information. So as a business owner, it is your responsibility to know that. And just like Deren said, a lot of those things are in your control. So like an office that's going to botch the overhead because you're buying a ton of supplies, or you're buying this huge cone beam or things like that, the team literally has no control over those items. That's you as the owner, and you need to plan and prepare for that. But I totally agree with you, Deren, that this is an area where doctors, like, get your team to understand. And I really love bonuses from a team member side, like if something's out of my control, I lose motivation to want to work towards it. It's like, well, Dr. Flesher could just decide to buy some huge thing and botch the overhead, and then our bonus is gone. That is so demotivating for me as a team member because I feel like my bonus is out of my hands and I have no way to achieve it because you ultimately hold my fate every single month and I can't control it. So I love what you just said of anything you guys can do to give the team power so it's within their hands and it's not feeling like it's always outside of their hands, I've found is the most successful bonus in a practice. It doesn't feel like it's a dangling carrot that they can never achieve because that actually will do the opposite and create resentment instead of motivation.
Yeah. So you can either do collections or adjusted production, but I think that those, for me, those are the things that are real to the team. Those are things that they feel like they can control, but they do have to come from somewhere. So as I kind of alluded to in the beginning, I feel like the money has to be there for me. So whatever number I feel like is appropriate for me to take home, and after that I can share, I need to know that number. And then I need to know what does the office need to collect for me to make that number. And then based on our collections percentage, what do we need to produce to collect that number? And then stepping back, you've kind of figured out, you've reverse engineered, what does the office need to do daily that would get you to the point where at the end of the year, you've produced enough that based on what you collect, you've collected enough that you've paid yourself enough that then you've got enough left over to share with the team. So I kind of start with me, like what do I need to do for me? What does the office need to do for me? Then based on what we collect, what do we produce? How many days are we going to work? And now that's our daily goal. And then anything above and beyond that, we do a monthly bonus. So I don't want to, some people do daily or weekly. I feel like that is too susceptible to kind of little sprints and then little lags, maybe purposely, maybe not.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so there's little sprints and little lags, whether it's intentional or not on purpose, I don't know. But if you do it daily or even weekly, I feel like that maybe things get packed into certain days or weeks, and then the next week they're not looking ahead enough and it suffers. So for me going monthly, I feel like it's less susceptible to those peaks and valleys, even if it's subconscious.
Sure.
But it's short enough that there's reward at the end. If you do annual bonuses, I feel like a lot gets lost. And
that's too far away.
Yeah, the first 6 or even 9 months, nobody even thinks about it or cares. And then the last couple of months, you're sprinting to see what you can do. So
right.
For me, a month works both from being short enough, but also being long enough. And then also from an accounting perspective, if you have bonuses that are daily or weekly, well, somebody's got to tally those up. And I'm not trying to make all that extra work for me. So I feel like that month is the sweet spot of like, it's frequent enough that everybody feels like they're working towards something every day, but it's infrequent enough that we're not overpaying for big days and getting punished by the worst days. And I'm not working every weekend to run all these bonuses. It's a good middle ground. So I forgot even what the original question was. You want to talk about hygiene bonuses?
I want to talk about bonuses in general.
Okay.
So how do you bonus your hygiene, and then how do you bonus the rest of your team?
Okay. So my team, everybody first has a threshold of what does the office have to do? And like I said, I have that kind of reverse engineered. What does the daily production goal look like based on what I need the month to look like? And then if we cross that threshold, that's where all these extra little departmental or personal goals come into play. So we first of all have that bonus figured out. And that's going to be different for every office based on numbers of days worked and rent and overhead and all the things that come into play for everybody. But figure out that number and then maybe make your first level of bonus 10% higher than that number. So you got a little extra cream on top, 10%, where that's all you as the doctor. That's your reward for doing better. And then at that 10% threshold is where I start to pay my team. So in the same way that I kind of reverse calculated the daily goal, we also give a daily bonus that's calculated at the end of that month. So if we work 13 days this month, the bonus might be, I don't know, 6 or 7. I don't remember what my exact numbers are. I don't have it in front of me, but let's say $7 a day for hitting the certain number of production bonus or production goal. So if we produce $90,000 this month. That means that everybody on the team gets an extra $7 per day that we worked that month. And we worked 13 days. So that means everybody gets $91 at the end of the month. If you go 10% above that, so, $99,000, if we're starting at 90, then maybe the bonus is not $7, it's $15.
Gotcha.
And then 10% above that would be the third goal. And if it's $9,000, you might get $22 or $23 a day. And it can get pretty big. And I want it to be big because that extra 10%, I want the team to get proportionally more of that, because rent didn't go up, utilities didn't go up, even the hourly pay of the team didn't go up outside of the bonus. So your fixed costs are the same. Your variable costs are going up, but they're not the majority of your overhead. So anyway, I want to share more as the goals get hit. And also, those are harder to hit too. So I want them to be more rewarded for it. So if it's 7, it might be 15, and then it might be, I just picked numbers out of the air, but it might be $24 for the top one, and it's per day.
And I'm guessing you don't just pull those numbers out of the air. How do you come up with what you do per day? Have you come up with a calculation for that, or is it kind of like what feels good? I'm sure you've got more than just feels good knowing who you are.
Let's just use like $1 million. You want to collect $1 million in a year, because based on last year that meant that you made whatever you were comfortable with as a doctor. So you've somehow come up with collecting $1 million is what you need to do. So you have to then divide that, or whatever it is, multiply that by your collection percentage. So if you're collecting 95% of $1 million, or excuse me, if you're collecting $1 million, but you need to produce enough to collect that, then you need to have that additional buffer built on top of that. So,
right.
What is that? 0.95, whatever that is on top of that. So you come up with that number, and then you divide that by the number of days you work in the year. So for me, we plan to work 50 weeks a year. We know that there's going to be, like, this week's Thanksgiving week. We're not going to work 1 out of our 3 days this week, because Wednesday always falls apart. So there's a couple days here and there around Christmas. There's going to be a bad weather day, an ice day. So we don't schedule days off, but there's roughly, give or take, 4, 5, 6 days a year that we're going to take off, which is 2 weeks for us. So my math is 50 weeks. That's 150 days working our 3-day week schedule. So you divide that, whatever, $1 million plus number, by 150, and now that's your daily goal. And then you look at each month, and your monthly goal is going to be different.
Right.
Daily goal, and multiply it by your number of days for the month. So every month's going to vary. We have anywhere from 10 to 15 work days, depending on how everything lines up. So if you've got 13 days in a month, then your monthly goal is $6,000, or your daily goal is $6,000, and you got 13 days. Well, now you've got to make $78,000 in production to hit bonus level 1. So that's that kind of reverse engineering you have to do. You have to figure out, what does the year need to look like, collections percentage multiplied off of that, and then divide that by your number of probable work days. And now you've got a daily goal that they can look at every day and say, have we scheduled to this goal? Are we on track? And then, like I said, I don't do it daily, but I want them to have something to look at on the schedule that makes sense in their heads. And then at the end of the month, I put this little whiteboard in the back room. I do all the math for them. I've got a little sheet that spells it all out if they really want to get into the details. But at a glance, those little, like, United Way, where they've got the little temperature, like, thermometer things.
Yep.
Yeah.
Home Depot. They're all over the place. Yes.
Yeah. So I do that too. At the beginning of every month, I figure out, okay, we got this many work days, and this is our goal per day. And so I put those little goals on there. And then at the beginning of the month, put where we stand today. And then every few days we go update it, and hopefully it's going up towards our goals. And then at a glance, they can see, we're $5,000 away from bonus level 1. If we can get a couple more crowns in this week, we're going to hit that bonus. And that means it's whatever, $6 or $7 a day that we get for this month. And so they don't have to do all that math in their head.
Right. It's just simple.
I'm not trying to keep it a secret from them, because the math is a little complicated. It's all spelled out if they want to read the paper, but I put it in a nice, quick little summary of, at a glance, when they're on break eating their lunch, they can look up at that and say, we're close. Let's let's push a little harder. Let's see if we can get some unscheduled treatment in or whatever. So
does your hygiene bonus the same as the rest of your team, or do you have hygiene on a separate bonus?
No, so that's a good question. We initially had everybody on this, and hygiene didn't feel like they controlled in the same way that I wanted the numbers that they look at to feel like they were within their control. Hygiene verbalized to me that they didn't feel like they controlled collections and unscheduled treatment as much as we'd like for them to be involved in that's not 100% their influence. So then we said, okay, well, what if we remove you from this pool, but we create one for you? And so they have their own production goal, which we talk about in DSI being, was it 3.3% or 3.3 times? I'm sorry.
Yep, 3.3 times.
Yeah, so in the same way that we want them to produce 3.3 times what their pay is, I did the same thing as I did with my office goal and said, okay, well, that's what they should be doing to kind of cover their pay. What do they need to do to bonus? We added 10% onto that. So they're 3.6 times their pay is where they start to get a bonus. So that 3% above and beyond, that's mine. And then once they get to 3.6, that's where they get to the point where they're sharing in that. It's not that number, that bonus is not directly tied to fluoride and sealants. But obviously you have to be doing those things well to end up with that bonus.
Right. No, and I like that you talked about this because it's interesting how you play this out. And honestly, you guys, there are 1,000 ways to do bonuses. And Deren, I appreciate you talking about, you need to reverse engineer it, because if you don't know what your daily should be, you start bonusing, and that's when you get into hot water because you're paying them when you haven't figured it out. And also, I want to just step back a few other steps where you talked about how you as the doctor make sure you're covered first. And I'm sure some teams are like, oh, like, of course he's thinking about himself. But I will say, I love that you said that, because as a business owner myself, so often I think about my team before myself, and I put them ahead of me. And as much as I want to feel like this humble person that's just doing good work for my team, I get freaking stressed out of my mind when our expenses aren't covered and I'm trying to bonus my team at the same time. And I'm not a very happy boss at that point in life. Because everything on the back end is not taken care of, like my pay is not taken care of, and I'm stressed financially, but yet I'm bonusing my whole team. That does not make for a healthy work environment. And so I think it's really brilliant, because you're a better boss, you're a better dentist, and you're not stressed financially because you know all your bases are covered. And then at that point, bonusing's fun as opposed to stressful. And so I love that you actually painted that picture first. And then with the bonus, I love that you have, like, you made it into a daily bonus that's paid out monthly, because I love daily bonuses. I think they're super fun. I think it's great for people to see it. I also like weekly because it's smaller. But what I love that you did is you made it to where it's a daily bonus, but that's paid monthly, and they have the ability to get it as high of a bonus as they want it to be. And you've clearly spelled it out so they can easily see that. And that to me is sheer brilliance, because if a team can resonate and a team can see how they can be in control of it, that's when you get momentum with them following through and seeing how they do it. So I think I love how you did this. Like I said, there's 1,000 different ways to bonus. So thank you for diving deep into your bonus system. I really appreciate that. So Deren, I want to finish this podcast up. I want to talk more about your Medento, because like I mentioned at the beginning of how cool your voicemail is for the post-op and for the unscheduled treatment calls. Just tell us a little bit more about Medento as we wrap up this, because I think it's such a cool product that people can use. And honestly, docs, like, you look like $1 million and it's so cheap. Deren, like, I don't know when you're going to raise your prices, but I'm telling everybody to get in before you increase this voicemail price, because it's so cheap, and it would be amazing as a team member to have this as an option to make our office look like $1 million, have better patient care, and take like a huge chunk off of all of our team members that I know every person forgets to do. I haven't yet to see an office who does flawless post-op calls. Like, it's always a great idea, but it doesn't usually execute.
This week we came out with a pretty huge update that really is exciting for me and for a lot of people. We initially made our software kind of Android based, which limited the ability for people to use it. I know everybody loves Apple products and iPads and stuff, and our kind of next iteration was to get it Apple iPad friendly. And so this week we have our iOS app is in play. So all your iPads are back in play.
Nice. Congrats.
Yeah. And then it's also browser based too. So really there's no computer, if you will, whether it's a tablet, an iPad, or your desktop, that can't do the same thing with Medento moving forward. So
cool.
It's become super user friendly. It still does everything that that it could do before with the consents and the paperwork and all the reminders and confirmations and all those things. But to be able to now utilize every little gadget, device that you could want to, even your phone, does it on everything. So that was exciting. Additionally, let me think about some of the other. our treatment plans. We just made to where you can present different treatment plan options.
So
if
cool.
If you put in like layman's terms as kind of the secondary term, so you don't want to say two surface resin composite, you just want to say white filling, like all your fillings just say white filling, because that's what patients care about. They don't care that it's a MO two surface resin composite.
Right.
You can have our software for the treatment plan pull the layman's terms, and so now it just says tooth number 2 white filling, tooth number 3 porcelain crown, tooth number 5 root canal and crown. So you can have it say
cool
the words that you're using instead of reverting back to the dentalese that we want to use, and then just confusing them. At the most important part of your process is now you're trying to get them to say yes, and the numbers and the money is right in front of them.
And I love that you guys use the layman's terms. I think that's such a cool idea that you guys do with this treatment planning, because you're right. That's an easy spot to not confuse your patient. And that's when you really need to close a treatment plan. So that, I think, is such a good way that they can actually understand, connect with you guys, and close it that way. So very cool with the treatment planning. It's all, every user is now, like every computer software is user friendly. So Deren, like I know what you do with your voicemail is, from what I've heard from offices, is that they literally can call for Postop, and it's just automated, and it links into your software where it will call the patient without it ringing on their cell phone. And it's HIPAA compliant. It's not patient specific. So it's just a generalized but personalized voicemail that will ask about their post-op and have them call the office if need be. It also can be the doctor calling about unscheduled treatment plans and also recare, where it's literally just dumped into the voicemail. So you get the credit of having the voicemail without having to make the calls, and it's automated. Is that correct? Because that feels like too good to be true.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And, with this most recent update, you used to have to pull it from your computer, but now it's actually saved in the Medento dashboard. So those voicemails just got even easier.
That just sounds like a dream. It just sounds so cool. So, Deren, if people want to find out more about this product, if they want to hear more about what you do, how do they contact you?
So they can either email me at Deren, which is DEREN, at medento.io, or I'm on Facebook, DSN. You can message me either place, and I'm happy to answer any question.
And you guys can always email hello@thedentalateam.com, and we will happily send you over to Deren as well. I think Deren does a phenomenal job with this. So guys, check him out. It's so stinking cheap. And if you guys use the Dental ATeam, you can get this right now. So I would totally schedule it. I've been telling offices left and right, like that voicemail service, nikes. That will save you so much time. So Deren, thank you so much for being on the podcast today, for sharing your nuggets about hygiene and how you do your hygiene with sealants and fluoride, your bonus, and then also about your very, very impressive product, Medento. So Deren, as always, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate you.
Yeah, thanks, Kira.
Of course. All right, guys, stay tuned because Deren's going to be back on with me again in February. So for more information, check him out, guys. Go check out that medento.io. You can also email us. We'll get you on over to Deren. And Deren, thank you again. So guys, I'll catch you later. Thank you so much for joining me, and I'll catch you next time on the Dental ATeam podcast. And that wraps it up for another episode of the Dental ATeam podcast. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.